welcome to one of the most brain dead tanks on a almost brain dead game mode, to be honest with you, in World of Tanks console. So let's look at this brain dead tank, why it is so, and why it is inordinately boring for like 99% of the people that you're going to be facing, as well as being pretty disgusting for you to actually play. And we've got two insane replays, well, one of them being very, very good, where basically it is the sum of why I don't particularly like Cold War, and the second one being similarly as broken, as you will see that I am basically 1 versus 3, and we remove basically all of them. So anyway, starting off, the Chieftain CTR. This is the tank of choice today. This is the new kind of Chieftain Badger hybrid tank that has this fast fire rate. It is, of course, a vehicle that does 530 damage with 418 millimeters of penetration in Era 2. And since we've been seeing a lot of the broken tanks coming out in Era 3 and the matchmaker in Era 3 being absolutely disgusting and almost unplayable with the amount of weasels in the game that, they have literally just completely annihilated Era 3, regardless of the good changes that are coming to the tech tree with regards to reduced silver prices of tanks, that sort of stuff. Era 3 is an absolute mess, and so we're looking at this Era 2 tank that is equally very, very good. So I'm not going to say that this tank is absolutely broken, etc. It is a non-turreted tank destroyer that relies upon basically farming damage really quickly, with its rate of fire being 5.54 seconds. And an average damage per minute of 5,740. Now, for example, the M50 Ontos, although we haven't got a commander in it, is sitting at 3,700. With a commander, you're probably looking at about 4,400. Of course, it's a lot harder to hit your shots when you're using the M50 Ontos, and it is a autoloader. So there is a significant difference in damage per minute, and of course, armor, because this tank actually has a little bit of armor in the game. It's very well angled, and people, for some reason in this game mode, can't seem to hit some of the weak points, which is not surprising because the weak points are so small. You see the lower plate, it is a weak point, but it is so small, it's rounded as well, making it very difficult to pen. And so your ultimate aim is to try and find it side on like this and go in through that inner drive wheel, and even doing that is a little bit of a pain. The cupola of this tank is pretty small, and trying to hit it, and some of it is not really armor anyway, so you've got to try and hit it. And when it's on a slope, it's very difficult to hit that cupola, especially if it's moving, wiggling side to side like this. You can often miss it. So that's kind of how this tank works. Obviously, if you get around the side, you can pen it every single time, as with basically any tank, and the rear is absolute garbage. So it's really a case of sitting in front of opponents, and I'm going to show you how that can be completely broken and basically unplayable to try and play against later on in this video, as we go into the gameplay portion and why it is just brain dead kind of gameplay, alongside just my thoughts on Cold War at the moment, and why maybe you don't see as many Cold War gameplays and stuff like that. And we'll get into that throughout the gameplay. But obviously, setup wise, we've gone for a full camo build, so we can basically just sit and snipe and not do anything else. And then, of course, advanced loader for increased DPM. If you really wanted to min-max this tank, I would drop the advanced concealment and pop in improved ventilation. And then potentially, maybe you'd want to put in traction system for the increased traverse speed, so that you can turn quicker. That's basically the reason why I would maybe go with that. So maybe you drop off the full visibility and view range perks or equipment, so both of these two, and then pop vents and traction system on, but it's down to you. In terms of what we're using for our consumables, full premium, and then ammo loadout, we have 25 standard, 24 premium. Basically, the premium rounds are just better in basically penetration. There's no real difference between the two. You've got APCR as standard, so it's a very fast round regardless, so really easy to hit people on the move from the back of the map, and of course 530 alpha. And then you've got the premium APF SDS rounds, which is yeah, just basically a better version of APCR, which has increased penetration. So if you really wanted to play this tank to the maximum, you'd just be firing full premium. There's no negatives to using the APF SDS rounds, and then of course Hesh as your kind of premium rounds, which is good for light tanks if you find them, or potentially if you want to find some vehicles that are super close to you that don't have a lot of armor. Maybe you come up from behind, but for the most part I wouldn't recommend even you loading this, because you may end up bouncing with 290 pen. But with that out of the way, and the statistics kind of covered, 10 degrees of gun depression, and yeah, a ton of rounds in this vehicle, 50% silver bonus, which is nice because you do earn quite a bit of silver in this tank. 48 kilometers an hour top speed is not amazing, but it is nice to be able to get into the position at the beginning of game and then not move from there, and then you just have to rely on turning and making sure you keep your frontal armor to the opponents at all times where you can. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the gameplay, and let me show you the best one so far as to why I think this sort of tank is completely boring and why I just despise playing Cold War for the most part. Let's jump in. Now then, jumping into the first replay, it is of course on Serene Coast, and as with all kind of heavily armored frontal vehicles, then yeah, you basically don't want to move, because this is Cold War, remember, and you can see absolutely everyone in the game regardless of whether they're spotted or not, and you can see a load of people crossing from the start, which we try and get a bit of damage on, but unfortunately so far not able to hit anyone. You find ourselves a nice little FV4211 who we don't pen with premium rounds. Not a problem, because maybe we'll find him later on. Then we find a guy sat at the back of the map similar to what we're doing, the Leopard 1 here, and we try and get one into him, going for just the frontal armor of the FV, but we hit the upper plate or the track, and then we don't pen him, and then the second one doesn't pen because it's an FV4211, and then of course we managed to hit the turret, which is a easy pen with the premium rounds that we do have. We see that he's aiming at us, so we do a little flick, and then he manages to bounce off of us, which is great. And you can see I'm just trying to aim for the turret. We're trying to get used to the new Elite controller that I've got. With the sensitivity and stuff, it is slightly different, making aiming a little bit harder, but either way, we're just going to farm this FV. Now he tracks us, which is not ideal. We are at the back. He's obviously using the Cold War mechanics, which is that you can see everyone regardless of whether they're actually spotted or not. And yeah, so what we do, we get behind the bush, and then that makes it a little bit harder for him to be able to hit us and reliably hit our weak point. But we find ourselves another vehicle pushing in, and so we just get back behind this kind of area over here. Then I get done in by the whole lock, but don't worry, this game does get better. We've picked up 2,000 damage, which is okay, and then yeah, another little bit. The Chieftain's still out in the open. Can we get one more into him? Of course we can, and that's because the reload of this tank is disgusting. You can see 5-second reload to be able to do 530 damage, and yeah, the amount of damage you can pick up with this tank is incredible, and I think people don't really understand just how good it is, and they end up sitting in front of you. Meanwhile, you take all of their hit points, and then they realize that they can't actually reliably pen you 90% of the time. So you can see here, going for the little Brennus here, trying to go for the inner drive wheel to track him and keep him locked in place, but don't worry, it's fine. As you can see, with every Cold War game mode, you see the people YOLO in at the beginning of the game, all on one flank, basically just YOLOing. That is my experience of Cold War pretty much 90% of the time, and gets even worse when you start playing Era 3. But you can see here, from basically not moving in the most brain dead possible way, we've picked up 4,000 damage. And granted that this is a premium tank with double silver bonuses, because we've applied a double silver bonus, but essentially we'll be able to earn a ton of silver in this game so far, and I've literally done nothing of use to anyone, bar literally sitting in the base and farm up some of the opponents. And I was thinking, oh well, we've lost this game, it doesn't really matter, I'm not expecting to win it, it's just basically a case of waiting around and seeing how much more damage we can farm. You can see there we find ourselves that Leopard 1 from the beginning of the game, who's still sat in the kind of hill area, and we hit him a couple times, which is nice. The Brennus then decides he's going to come outside on, so easy damage, and you can see how easy this game mode is when you literally don't move. And you often think, yeah, this is just a lucky game. But literally 90% of my games where I have amazing games are where you just sit back, and if you try and go in this in Cold War, you just seem to get YOLO'd by like 5 tanks because, you know, you didn't get the teammates, or maybe your teammates don't help you, blah blah blah, and then like 5 tanks come YOLOing around the corner at 70 kilometers an hour, take you out within 2 seconds and leave you in a very dire situation. But you're seeing here we are a 3 versus 9 here, so not likely we're going to win this one, but it's fine because maybe we can farm up a little bit more damage. You can see the Object 120 here YOLOing over the tracks. Obviously can't see us because we're using the camo and the view range perks that allow us to just have slightly better. We want to get one more into him because he's got a pretty nasty gun if he hits us. You see that I actually moved behind this rock. Now that is primarily just so that I can be able to kind of keep my right hand side covered as we're farming up these guys who are over here. You can see it's a M60A2. And we just need to help our teammates out as much as possible as the enemy team YOLO. And you can see here just trying to firing as many shots, just basically firing as soon as we reload, kind of the shots that we think might hit. You can see here T62 is out in the open, so we want to get rid of him. He obviously doesn't realise how good of a reload we have, and he's back in the garage as well. And yeah, now we have that Brennus from earlier. Hopefully we can pen him. We do. We hit his mantlet, which is kind of the weakest point. It doesn't have any of that spaced armour. And unfortunately now we're finding out that, yeah, trying to pen that thing is not the easiest unless you hit the cupola, or you can hit the hull armour, blah blah blah. But it wouldn't matter because now we finish off the M60. And yeah, you can see that having moved, you know, probably a maximum of 200 meters in this game, we've picked up nearly 10,000 damage. Make that 10,500 to be precise, roughly. And there you go. The enemy AMX has come around the corner. He's looking mighty fine. The enemies have thrown away 5 vehicles to take out just 1. The Object 120 here, obviously typical Cold War player, firing on the move, auto-aiming most likely, ends up missing. And then he's realised that, uh-oh, this is a bad situation for me, and he's going to be a little bit of a scaredy cat and just basically hide behind the rock, which is like, yeah, it's just boring for both me and him because I can't do anything. I can't fire unless I want to get hit by him, and he's just going to sit there and wait for me to maybe take a couple hits or make a misplay. But you can see here he's getting a rather, I don't know, I guess bored of whatever he's doing. Now he is looking like he's trying to poke me. The only real way he can really take me out here is if I make a serious misplay, because even if I take a hit, then we're still going to get taken out. But you can see here, within a couple of seconds, we've removed both the 120 and the T72 AV, and we're up to 11,800 damage with 5 enemies taken out and 3,200 blocked. And oh my god, I'm actually moving for the first time in Cold War. Way, wow. Really dynamic gameplay this, basically sniping from your base from the beginning of the game. So if you're interested in literally not moving, not having to think, and play a tank like this in a mode that basically rewards sitting at the back and sniping people across the map, then this tank is for you. As far as I'm aware, this tank, it's fun to play when you're literally dumping on literally everyone that you're playing up against, but for the most part it's not particularly that fun. We end up with a victory here. As you can imagine, having pulled off that sort of result, we had quite a bit of damage, 13,142 to be precise, with 6 enemies taken out, 1,792 base XP, 3,870 blocked, 575,000 silver for our troubles, with no kind of extra silver bonuses. It was just the ×2 silver bonus that we applied as kind of like the XP booster. And yeah, we end up coming top of the team. But don't worry, because we didn't actually get a mastery badge for picking up this amount of damage. So you can see where this tank maybe is kind of falling into in terms of the highest level of what it can do, and that's just purely based on how much damage it can output in a minute and the armor that it has frontally. So make of that what you will. Basically, don't move in this tank, and you will probably do a lot better than if you try and go in and face people. Obviously, certain maps will kind of force you to go in if you want to get some damage, especially town maps, because you know you don't have the ability to snipe halfway across the map because there's a load of buildings in the way. But on every map that you can do, I would recommend literally sitting in the base and not doing anything, because it means that your weak points are harder to hit. It means that your accuracy is much better than most people's in this tank anyway, so you can snipe across the map, whereas they might miss you with their accuracy. And then your armor becomes more effective at long ranges. Your penetration on this tank is pretty dirty, so you're basically penning everyone anyway. And yeah, it's just a very, very kind of balanced tank that I think everyone will enjoy, unless of course you don't like sitting in the back of the map sniping at people for the whole game. And you might be thinking, well, yes, Eclipse, that was just one game. You might be being a bit harsh on this sort of tank and this sort of mode. But, you know, let's jump into the very next game, having learnt that apparently staying in the back of the map is the best way to go. Let's do the exact same thing. And so we're playing on, of course, Razanai. This is a map that is quite good. It's quite open. There's lots of space for you to be able to fire halfway across the map and even further at people that you can literally see because true vision's a thing. And yeah, let's actually talk about the whole Cold War situation and why you don't see me play it a whole lot, why I find it very boring, and why I think that the sort of tanks that they keep introducing into Cold War make the game mode just usually worse. And so yeah, let's start off with why I don't play Cold War. Well, Cold War has been one of those things that the introduction of it I kind of really enjoyed. I thought it could be quite good for the game. I thought it'd be really interesting to be able to try out some of the newer tanks. But my most annoying thing was the introduction of True Vision. Now, True Vision, I know some of you might love it, some of you might hate it, some of you are maybe indifferent. But for me, the whole point was that they introduced this True Vision system in World War II as a test a long, long time ago, way before Cold War was introduced, like 2 years ago. And so what they did with that is that they introduced this True Vision system where you could see anyone across the map. Now, what happened with that? Well, the disparity between good players and bad players became infinitely bigger because all of the good players knew exactly where people cross, and some of the newer players and less experienced players just got farmed for their entire health before the game had really even reached a minute. So not particularly the greatest experience, which is why when they introduced it and they did a feedback poll, it got like 90% of people saying, no, this is not a good change. And then like 5% or 10% saying like, oh yeah, it's okay. And then of course we had, and probably those 5 and 10% were the people that were just farming people for the entire game. And then they were like, okay, that's not ideal. Then they went away, and then like a couple months later, they were like, let's retry the game mode. Let's get a little bit more data, see what people say. So they reintroduce it. And what do you think the statistics were of the game mode? It was like 80% of people were like, no, I don't like this, and having True Vision. So that was good. And then they went away again and were like, yeah, okay, the people don't like this thing. And then they went away again and introduced it again. And can you guess what the statistics were like after the introduction again into the kind of test? Well, it was overwhelmingly negative, and of course it was bad. So what happened then is they then went away, and it was gone for like a year and maybe a little bit more. And then surprise, surprise. Oh, hey there. This is Cold War. This has True Vision, which I guess it might slightly work a little bit better. But the problem with True Vision is that it rewards basically camping in the base, from my understanding, than it does from basically, you know, sitting backwards. And you can see in the background here, we farmed up like 4k damage before the game has really even, well, before we've been able to actually fight anyone. And you can see where I'm going with the Chieftain CTR in this sort of location, where we pick on one opponent, farm down all of their hit points. No point spreading around the damage because, you know, we want to basically remove these guys. And there you go, one full health tank out of the game. And we've taken fairly low amounts of damage. And so yeah, now we pick on the next guy. It's a T-72A. And then, yeah, so they reintroduced this kind of Cold War game mode. It has this True Vision system, which, you know, some people like it, some people hate it. I'm sure some of you really enjoy it. You find it better, I don't know. But from my experience, not particularly the best game mode. Just purely based on, I don't see why they didn't just introduce it as like a tier 11, tier 12, 13, blah blah blah, as part of the kind of normal tech tree game mode, and rather than having the 2 separate modes. I think that would have been a better way of doing it. It would have been a bit more consistent throughout the entire game mode, and not ended up with what we've got now, whereby there's 2 separate player bases that play the same game but don't interact with one another and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a weird kind of system that I feel like could have been solidly put together as one game. But yeah, anyway, it kind of just was a game mode that I was not interested in. I found it very boring and kind of brain dead for the most part, because everyone has like 60 kilometers an hour to 70 kilometers an hour, and when you give like everyone, including new players, the ability to go 60 and 70 in a tank that has armor and can bounce a few rounds, they just YOLO in, and it just becomes a 2-minute gameplay fest where everyone just goes in. Like you can see here, like throughout this entire gameplay, if you go back and watch the radar, literally like 90% of my team were in 2 squares. So it was basically, this is the kind of gameplay that I despise about playing the whole Cold War game mode, and why I'm not a massive fan. And I feel like I want to be, I'm not trying to like just basically hate on it. I just find the game mode, compared to what I like about World of Tanks, whereby, you know, you have all of this stuff, that's kind of why I don't particularly like it. I also think that having the true vision system removes one of the kind of mechanics out of the game, which is of course spotting. Obviously it can be frustrating when you first start the game and you have no idea what spotting is and why there's invisible tanks in the map that can shoot you. But once you get the hang of it, it's like an additional gameplay mechanic. It's like anything, you know, when you first don't know about it, you get angry, you're like, why can't I do anything, blah blah blah. But it adds another level to the game that I think is good. That unfortunately isn't a thing on Cold War, which means that basically like it just takes another layer of kind of a fairly simplistic game anyway into a more simplistic game. That should realistically be fairly complex. Obviously there are quite a few niche things to World of Tanks, and there are things like weak points, that sort of stuff, ammo types, there's loads of different things that you can learn, but taking one of the core aspects of the game out was one of the things that I wasn't particularly a massive fan of. And it does feel a bit bad in terms of like the way people move now. Everyone's spotted all the time, and the view range that is in Cold War is crazy, so everyone gets spotted regardless of if you're in bushes and stuff like that anyway when you basically fire. Yeah, it's just one of those things that I think is a bit of a drain whenever I play anyway. I'll be interested to see your thoughts. Like this is just my thoughts, kind of a bit of a video where we talk about the new tank and show you why it is very good. The tank itself is amazing. It is very, very good. And of course a very strong frontal armor, a few weak points, but realistically pretty good. Not the best at earning silver, because you don't get that much XP with this tank. Because of the fact that it's, you know, the requirements are quite high in terms of being able to get mastery badges. I mean, 8.6 thousand damage was not even a, you know, 80% badge, mastery badge. It was a 50%er. So you can kind of see where everyone's going with this vehicle if they do decide to buy it. This is one of the tanks maybe I will purchase, I don't know. But for the most part, yeah, it is a very, very good tank. But I just wanted to run through why I don't play Cold War, why I find it very brain dead in terms of the gameplay. If you want to just come on and have a casual experience where you don't have to think very much, that's what Cold War is for in my eyes. That's kind of how I play it. Not really having to think, basically just going around the map, either sitting in base because it's just better for the most part at the beginning of the game. Obviously at the later half it's good to move around and get into a better position, because it might not always work sitting at the back. People can spot you and you can constantly be there, but it's a good way to get free damage at the beginning of the game, which in my eyes shouldn't be a thing. If you don't have to move from your spawn when you spawn in to do the best result, there's something going wrong there. But yeah, I'll be interested to see what you guys think. That's just kind of my brain dump onto the internet, and yeah, I'll be interested to see what you think. I think the gameplay in the game on Cold War is something that I'm not a massive fan of, especially when you get to the higher tiers where you've got all of these missile launching light tanks that just roll around at 85 to 90 kilometers an hour, dump you for half your health with one kind of missile, then you ram them for like no damage, and then you know, considering you're like probably a 70-ton tank ramming into something that weighs about 10, and you deal like 100 damage, not quite sure that works entirely as you would expect in real life, considering that, you know, the whole idea of True Vision is that it's more real to life and stuff like that. But yeah, it's kind of just a video talking about the game mode and my thoughts on it, and hopefully not just kind of crapping all over it, but just why I don't play the game mode, why I find it a bit boring, and why I find the kind of game mode a little bit brain dead for most kind of players, I guess, where you just kind of YOLO in, you don't really have to think. And I think if you're playing a game like this, that probably shouldn't be the case. But then again, I am only one player. As I always say, it's just my opinion. You guys might completely disagree, and it's absolutely fine to do so. I am fully aware that some of you love Cold War, and it's amazing. And yeah, maybe you like it because it's a little bit more casual in terms of how it plays and stuff like that. Or maybe you like World War II because it's casual as well, or you think it's the other way around. I don't know. It doesn't really matter in terms of, you know, it's fine to have your own opinion. And I'm not saying my opinion's correct either. I just want to put that out there as part of this video. I have, you know, I play the game the exact same. I might be a community contributor, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean anything in terms of my opinion. My opinion is no different to yours. So yeah, I'm just very interested to see what you guys think. And I thought this video would be a good recap, having shown you 2 gameplays where I didn't really move and did more damage than like 90% of the people in the game. And in fact, in both of the replays, did more damage than anyone else in the game. And yeah, that's kind of how this tank plays. A brain dead tank in a mode where you don't have to think. Sounds pretty good, right? And it can earn you a ton of silver as well. Thank you very much for watching. I'll be reading your comments quite carefully, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.